Last time we considered a challenge to Immanuel Kant's claim that the principle of beneficence, or rather our duty to help or to intervene in other people's lives to help them, his claim that that's an imperfect duty, greatly weaker than our duty not to hurt them, or duties of non maleficence. We considered the ideas of Tom Beecham and Jim Childress, suggesting that there are, in fact, situations in which our duty to help is perfect or is as weighty as our duty not to hurt. We considered the situation of a child who has been pushed or fallen into a pond, and we're there. We're the only ones who are there, and we know how to save the child. Um, they would say that since the child is facing grave risk, high probability of losing his life, our intervention is necessary to save the child. It is likely to work, and we can save the child at minimal risk to ourselves. Then surely we are profoundly obligated to jump in and help. Um, on their view, our duty to help there is perfect in relation to the duty not to have pushed the child into the pond in the first place. I do want to finish up our discussion at this point of the principle of beneficence by pointing to two caveats or two amendments to Beecham and Childress's proposal. The first one is this: from certain religious perspectives, the weight they give to the consideration of risk to the person acting may not be so significant. So Beecham and Childress suggest that if I'm in danger of dying myself in jumping in to help the child, even if I'm in danger of facing some probability of grave risk to myself, I may not be perfectly obligated to help. But think about Christian perspectives grounded in the teaching and example of Jesus. One can imagine from such a perspective the argument being made that we are obligated to follow Jesus, to sacrifice ourselves on behalf of others. And if that's true, then the consideration of whether I am putting myself at risk in attempting to save the child becomes largely irrelevant. Of course, that presupposes that one accepts the claim that we are somehow under a moral obligation to model our lives after Jesus, and upon the claim that Jesus' model is one of self-sacrifice. A second caveat, more important for our purposes here, is that professional roles also create perfect obligations to help in some contexts. So imagine, for example, in the pool scenario, if you were the lifeguard on duty. If you were the lifeguard on duty, your obligation to help, I think most of us would say, is perfect. That is to say, you have no discretion in determining whether to exercise your capacity to jump in the pool and save the child. You have that duty even if there are other folks around who might also do it. No, you're the one who has taken on that professional role, so you are obligated. Even if your jumping in put you at significant risk because of your professional role, we would expect you to face that risk. Maybe another scenario makes the point better. Imagine a child in the second floor of a burning house that's about to collapse. Now, if you or I walked by that house, we would probably say that we were not obligated to rush in and try to save the child. One, without fire training, without the proper equipment, how likely is it that we'd be successful? And there's a high probability that we would die ourselves. So if we refused to go in or did not go in, it's very likely that most of us would not fix moral blame on us for our failure to act. But imagine if you were a fireman. And it's not simply that because you are a fireman, you have the training and maybe the resources to enable you to carry out the rescue successfully. It's also that we expect you to face grave personal danger in the exercise of your duties. So for a fireman passing by in his gear and with his equipment were to say, well, I'm not going in, it's hot in there, I could get burned, I could even die, I think we would say that this person had profoundly failed to live up to their moral duties because of their professional role. Now, we will consider role obligations more in relation to the principle of fidelity, but there's an overlap here between the principle of fidelity and the principle of beneficence. Let me also suggest that this idea of a duty to help related to professional roles applies to healthcare professionals. You are not allowed discretion in deciding whether or not to come to the aid of your patients. You do not have the same discretion that a non-professional would have if coming to their aid involves a certain degree of risk. Taking on risk of infection, let's say, is a part of what we expect of people who take on the role of a healthcare professional. So you certainly have a perfect duty to help, even at risk to yourself, because of your professional role as a healthcare provider. Well, this concludes our discussion of the principle of beneficence for now. Let me remind you again of the point made in our by Post and Bluestein, that this is a principle that solidly undergirds the work of healthcare professionals. Healthcare professionals exist to use their knowledge and skill in ways that promote the welfare of others, that protect them from harm, that relieve their suffering, that enhances the quality of their patients' lives. A very important principle in the healthcare context.